In 2008, I think a lot of us remember the housing crisis where Wall Street stole homes, just calling it what it is. They stole homes from particularly a lot of elderly residents. When it came down to it, Barack Obama, during his presidency, decided to bail out Wall Street instead of the American people. Now, some people hear about that and they feel like that was in the past. We've gotten beyond that. But apparently we have not. Because this story came my way yesterday. Someone sent this to me. The housing crisis is still an issue in this country. And if you own your home or you're thinking about purchasing a home, I think you need to hear this story. We all know that homes have become increasingly more unaffordable in this country, but somebody's buying them. And if it isn't the American people who are buying these homes, who are buying these homes? Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. It says, if homes are unaffordable, then who is buying them? Pay attention, folks, because you may not be affected by this now, but I guarantee you, if this does not change, if we do not get rid of like corporate landlords, if we don't get rid of these Wall Street companies buying these homes, your home in the future may not belong to you. Let's go ahead and get into it.
There's one side of the story that we haven't covered yet. Everything that we've talked about has led to insane rents. The higher rents go, the less likely it is for people to be able to afford a deposit. If you're paying 50% of your income to some landlord or some Wall Street bank, it cripples your ability to save up anything, and it's a complete drain on the economy. That's not an exaggeration for some, as Londoners are paying over 50% of their income to rent on average. London renters also paid around £3,000 more than homeowners for what is essentially a much worse deal. On average across the UK, renters pay around 34% of their income on average to housing costs, nearly 4 times.
So this just goes to show you, he's talking about the UK first, but this is not just an American problem. This is happening internationally.
As much as the 9% that the average homeowner pays. Now sure, homeowners are normally richer than renters, so the figure is skewed by that fact, but it's still a clear example of how the West is changing. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. What's really destroying the renting market though is the chronic housing shortage. The majority of local councils in the UK haven't built a single home in the past 5 years, despite over 1 million people on the waiting list nationwide. Anyone who's been in the unfortunate position of needing to rent a place in a big city knows how awful it can be. In New York, hour-long waits and long lines of viewers are the norm for even the most overpriced, dilapidated apartments. Elsewhere, it can take months to find a place, with renters often being forced to offer the first 6 months up front, or even the whole year just to get a chance. Add in reference checks and the evasive questions and it's more like a job interview now. All of this, and people get much smaller, run-down living spaces. You just can't build a good life when your kitchen, your bedroom, and your living room are all the same room. It's a
They are shoving people into shoe boxes, okay? And again, this is not just a New York City problem, although that is the city people tend to point to, but it's happening all across the country. And it's even happening in cities like London. They want you to own less. They want you to have less. And they feel that you will be happy. The 6 months upfront rent has to be the most disgusting thing that I have heard. I already thought it was too much to ask someone to give 3 months rent upfront. But we now have gotten to the point where, again, some of these corporate landlords asking people for 6 months rent up front. Obviously, that excludes a big segment of the population. How many working class people can afford to come up with 6 months rent up front? Even some middle class people can't afford to come up with that. The housing market has moved more in favor for wealthy people, and it is hurting those that are working class.
Trap that more and more people can't get out of. In the UK, the renting population has doubled in the past 20 years. And if you're stuck renting, then you're always stuck paying someone else's mortgage, building their wealth and life instead of your own. However predatory mortgages might get, at least there's the eventual promise that you'll actually own the home. Although that's after you've paid years of interest to the bank, and you probably won't actually own the land. You just lease it. It's a trend that surpasses the housing crisis, the movement away from individual ownership. In the World Economic Forum's infamous predictions for 2030, they claim that you will own nothing and be happy with it. This is
Hold on to that phrase. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They are creating a society of forever renters. This is where they want you to be. They don't want you to own homes. Have you ever noticed, for those of you that tried to go through the home buying process or you were considering doing so, have you noticed that there seems to be a shortage of single family homes? But is it actually a shortage? Because it comes to this. It's not so much that there aren't many single family units. It's more so that somebody else is buying those homes, and it's most likely not the American people. That's why when you go to look for a house, that's why there isn't much available. And I'll show you an example here in Massachusetts. Someone's buying those homes. You're going to find out.
That's the key. And it's a big part of why institutional investors are scrambling to get in on the rental market by buying up family homes. They know what's coming because they're constantly trying to create it. The ingredients for it are already here. You don't need to own your own car, you can just use Uber. If you need to buy anything, a drone can deliver to your house. You don't need a cashier, you can use a machine. You never actually need to leave, other than going to the other tiny cubicle where you can spend the other half of your life in artificially lighted work. Might as well.
You hear this, guys? Think about it. You don't need to own your own home. You can just rent. You don't need to own a car. You can use an Uber. Although I would argue the Uber drivers need to own a car. Duh. So there's that. Do you see what they're trying to push? We have to be very careful.
Well, get your money's worth for that $3,000 a month studio apartment anyway. You don't need to actually buy anything either. You can just use credit to pay it out over the course of years. You don't need to own a home. You'll be much happier renting for the rest of your life. Even media and entertainment operate off these rules now. Subscription systems and monthly fees are the new norm for everything. It spreads so far that printers and other appliances now have subscription fees. Subscriptions that lock people out of using the thing they bought if they stop paying them. Obviously, most people aren't happy about this. It's a major cause for the underlying resentments you see in people today. But what choice do they have? Take the car example. Most people in America live in places with little to no public transport. Even your own two legs are mostly useless because everything's so spread out and built for cars. Uber and ride-sharing is becoming the only choice. That's despite the fact that it's far more expensive in the long run anyway. It's soon becoming a world where corporations own everything. It lets them extract far more money out of each person. If you're a company and you sell something for $100, obviously you only get $100. But if people rent it though for just $5 a month, they're already paying more in less than 2 years. Turning every transaction into debt simply makes them more money and gives them more power.
Let's pause here for a second. We are becoming not just a forever renter society, but a subscription-based society. Notice how everybody wants you to, buy a subscription just to use their service now. It's become more difficult for some of the news outlets, actually. There are some of them like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. In order for me to read this one article, subscribe. Only $1 a week. Only this is. Next thing you know, you have all these little tiny bills, but they add up over time. Remember, most people don't buy newspapers anymore. So they're like, how can we make money? Let's make them purchase a subscription in order to read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. All require you to have a subscription. Remember the days when you actually used to go to the store and purchase a DVD? I still have DVDs. I haven't watched them in a long time, but I still have them from back in the day. This isn't a thing anymore. Everybody wants you to subscribe to something and own nothing. And this is where we're moving as a society.
Ownership is being eroded everywhere you look. Even your own privacy is gone, renamed as data and stolen by these same companies to make the adverts slightly more annoying and effective. It's all part of the modern feudal system that they're trying to create. But most people can't see the bigger picture here. They just see the instant access we now have to every kind of instant pleasure you could possibly think of, and they consider it progress. At our current pace, we may well hit the World Economic Forum's predictions of 2030. Often it's framed as a necessary change in order to stop climate change. The responsibility is shifted to regular people, pressuring them to use paper straws, take shorter showers, and generally live worse lives. It's a psychological tactic to shift the blame without even acknowledging it happened. The real damage is done by corporations and governments. With all the garbage in the ocean, most...
Okay, and then they get into the climate issue. Now, I want to stay on the housing issue here because people need to understand why this is happening. Wall Street is buying a lot of US homes. And yes, this happened during the '08 housing crisis where they actually stole these homes from people, but this has not ended. Wall Street is still buying single family homes. They're buying those homes and they're choosing to rent those homes out. But why are they doing this? Why is Wall Street buying so many US homes? Let's get into this clip here.
There are many problems in the modern housing market, but the biggest one for Americans tends to be the price.
Prices rose 40% from the start of the pandemic.
In the final quarter of 2022, the typical U.S. home sold for a record-shattering $468,000. That's unaffordable for most Americans, leaving them to rent.
The housing costs are completely out of line with wages.
Some members of Congress believe Wall Street is a part of the problem.
What's outrageous is your tax dollars are helping Wall Street buy up single-family homes. You're
Of course, they got Ro Con Man in this video, which is really funny.
subsidizing Wall Street.
Massive private equity firms like Blackstone and Pradium Partners have backed a relatively new breed of homeowner, the corporation. This growing industry buys or builds single-family homes and then rents them out.
We hear from community organizers that are door knocking in certain neighborhoods and are just surprised by how many of the homes on a particular block will be owned by a corporate landlord.
Industry advocates say corporate landlords play a critical role in addressing the nationwide housing crisis.
What we have in housing in the United States is a chronic shortage since the financial crisis.
And so the question really is, how do we fill that gap? Is the answer incentivizing new housing development, new housing investment, new market participation?
What's behind the rise of corporate landlords? And how, if at all, will the government regulate them?
And this is a big part of the problem. We have no regulation for this issue. This is why it continues to happen. And when they discuss this idea of building more housing developments, oftentimes this means actually removing people from low-income neighborhoods, pushing them out by implementing or inserting a Whole Foods, a brewery. Don't get me wrong, I like my breweries, but a Whole Foods, a brewery, a juice bar, things that are going to increase the value of the property. So the landlords that owned those apartment buildings, they're more willing to sell them to corporate investors. Lower income people are pushed out of that neighborhood, have a longer commute now in order to get to work. And then what will happen is developers will come in, they will flip those apartment buildings and turn them into luxury condos. This happens in Boston all the time. So that's their idea of building more housing developments. They're less likely to build more single family homes and more likely to build luxury condo developments. So this idea of building more housing developments doesn't necessarily mean they're building single family homes for one, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're building housing for working class people.
As of 2023, corporate landlords only command a small portion of the rental housing in this country. The vast majority of all rental units, including apartments, are owned by individual, small-time investors. But there's growing focus on single-family homes.
Institutions, large companies, only account for about 1% of all the rental housing in the United States and only about 2% of the single-family rental housing.
There's a small but mighty group of companies that lead the industry.
So Pretium is the parent company for a company called Progress Residential that owns about 90,000 homes. They were started by Don Mullen, who came out of Goldman Sachs.
Pause here. That company was started by Don Mullen, who is a former partner of Goldman Sachs. First of all, these companies should not own homes. This is ridiculous. This is why you can't find a home. It's not just because you're not making a living wage. It's also because these houses are being bought by people like Don.
His mortgage group, Invitation Homes, was started by Blackstone, but Blackstone sold their position a long time ago. They own about 80,000 homes. American Homes for Rent, which was started by Wayne Hughes, they own about 60,000 homes. There's a company called Tricon Residential that's out of Canada. And then there's one called Amherst. Those are the big five.
In recent years, corporate landlords have been most active in the Sun Belt. In 2021, corporations bought 28% of all the homes sold in Texas.
Pause, because I want you to see this map. You see, guys, a lot of people think this is just a problem that's happening in the Northeast or the West Coast, right? No, no, no. Look at this map. This is happening in Texas, 28%. They own 28% of homes in Texas. That's insane. Look at where else they are. More so the Southeast, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, North Carolina is scooping in here. So you can see where they're going to places, these states that more likely have more land. So I used to live in the South, so I know there's more land in the South than there is up here in the Northeast. So that's where they're buying up a lot of these homes.
That figure was 19% in Georgia and 16% in Florida. Companies like Pradium and Blackstone target these markets. Blackstone in particular has held large stakes in several companies that dominate the region. Rent hikes for single-family homes in this region have outpaced other parts of the country. Since the onset of the pandemic, rents for a two-bed detached home increased about 43% in Phoenix.
Phoenix. You see this, guys? 43% in Phoenix. This is insane.
They're up 44% in Tampa and 35% in Atlanta.
44% in Tampa, Florida, 35% in Atlanta, Georgia. So you see what I mean? It's not just states like Massachusetts and California. They are operating in some of these states that actually have a lower cost of living. They're hitting those areas.
That's compared to 24% nationwide. Experts say that many of the properties bought up by institutional groups were previously owned by people who were destabilized in recent recessions.
There you go. And that's what they've been doing. People who have basically either bottomed out during a recession, some of them more likely 2008, they buy up these homes and then they start to rent them out. And now the banks own them. And there's no law against this. That's a big part of the problem. We need a law that prevents corporations from buying single family homes. That should be on the books day one. In fact, anyone who is running for president right now, put that on your platform. This is a huge problem.
After the pandemic, people saw the opportunity to go into these lower income neighborhoods, working class neighborhoods, buy up these houses and in communities that the working class can afford. And they're holding these houses, often for years, taking them off the market, making it even harder for young people and working class families to own a house.
Yeah, and Ro Connor, you trading stocks, so you trading stocks, so you really don't have any room to talk here.
Companies like Blackstone make serious money from these investments. For example, the company's real estate income trust delivered an 8.4% return on investment in 2022. This in a year when the wider stock market declined nearly 20%.
Part of the problem with private equity involved in housing is that they're in it for the short term. Their goal is to take a company, increase cash flow in order then to sell it or to take it public, which they did in the case of Invitation Homes. Unlike, maybe smaller landlords who still are looking to have a profit, may be in it more for the long term and see it as a long-term investment, are more concerned in terms of stability and concerned in terms of satisfied tenants and wanting there to be less turnover. With private equity, it's really about kind of maximizing the short-term returns.
In particular, real estate funds issued by private equity groups can be a useful hedge against inflation, boosting their popularity. Analysts write that by 2030, institutions may own 7.6 million single-family rental homes.
Let's go back to that number because I want people to really understand. They're saying institutions will own 7.6 million single-family rental homes by 2030. We don't have that long to get there. 2030 is actually just around the corner, folks. We need a bill, a piece of legislation right now that is passed to outlaw private equity from owning single-family homes. This is only going to get worse.
30. Institutions may own 7.6 million single-family rental homes. That could be more than 40% of the market. But that's a big if. Many real estate experts say the main solution to the problematic housing market is to build fast.
In the late 70s, early 80s, the United States routinely generated between 300,000 and 400,000 starter homes a year. In 2020, we generated 65,000.
So the numbers there are very telling. Look how many homes were built in the 1970s versus 2020. It is very clear what they're trying to push here, folks. They don't want us to have home ownership. Now, I'm very fortunate. I do have a home. I was lucky during the pandemic because they really decreased the interest rates. And I also participated in the first time home buyer program. So don't get it twisted. I had some help. Okay. Like my parents helped. So that's something to think about. But had it not been for those things happening, had it not been for the pandemic and the interest rates dropping as much as they did, had it not been for the help from our parents, I wouldn't own a home right now either. And the housing prices have continued to increase since the pandemic. So there's no way I would be able to buy this house today. They don't want us to own a home, you guys. They want us to be forever renters. Now I want to show you something else, because I want you to think about this, especially for those of you that have kids. I want you to think about their future. What happens when Wall Street buys most of the homes on your block? Let's get into this. Corporate landlords concentrated their purchases in middle and working class neighborhoods, many with larger Black and Latino populations, such as the Bradfield Farms neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, where large investors who paid in cash bought 50% of the homes. Investors went hog wild, said a local real estate agent. They are literally walking in to working class neighborhoods and pulling your home away from you. This is what they are doing. So much for the American dream. I tell people, if I meet someone and they just moved to the US and they say, oh, I came here, I'm going to do the American dream. I said, welcome to the American nightmare. Because if you don't come to this country with money, if you don't come to this country with degrees, it's not going to be too great for you, boo. It goes on to say cash offers from corporate landlords are appealing to home sellers because they don't have to wait for an appraisal and inspection or have a sale fall through if the buyer can't get a mortgage. So you have cash offers. These companies are showing up paying with cash. And if you're trying to sell, if you are a corporate landlord and you're trying to sell, obviously you're going to take the cash offer. The average person that's looking for a house, there's a couple of things we got to go through. Number one, you got to get the loan from the bank. That's the biggest hurdle. After you get approved for the loan, then there's the issue of we have to do the homeowner inspection. Some of these corporate landlords don't want to wait for that. There have been a number of times where people have had a home inspection and they said, never mind, I'm backing out of this. I'm not doing it. There's too many issues with this house. Here in Massachusetts, it has gotten to the point where what we call them, home shoppers, people who are trying to buy a home, they are actually choosing to forego the home inspection. Never, ever do that. That is terrible. That is a big mistake. There could be something seriously wrong with that house that you do not see based on the aesthetics because they have painted it very nicely. So they may have covered up mold or any other issues with that house. But people are doing that. That's how desperate people are to get these homes. It goes on to say the proliferation of corporate landlords by single family homes prevents potential buyers from building generational wealth through home ownership. The reality is this, folks. What is the best way to increase your net worth? Home ownership. Net worth is different from income. Your income is what you actually make, what you take home, your take home pay. Your net worth is what you own minus what you owe. So if you don't own anything, how are you going to build generational wealth? What are you going to have to pass down to your children? What are your children going to have to pass down to their grandchildren? So that's very important. It goes on to say here, they say they can rent you the American dream. But I know hundreds of people who don't want to rent, they want to own. That's coming from Jessica Marino, a community organizer with Action North Carolina. In the last few years, corporate landlords have seen their profits soar as rents increased by double-digit percentages and home prices rose at their fastest clip in U.S. history. In the Bradfield Farms neighborhood, the average home price skyrocketed 48% from 2021 to 2023. Wall Street investors have turned single-family rental homes into attractive investment assets, bundling multiple properties into portfolios for investors, including pension funds and mutual funds. Now let's have some fun. Let's play a little game. I want to show you what it looks like here in Massachusetts. We're going to pull up Redfin. Move you out the way. Wish I could scoot you over out the way too. Oh, we'll just make this larger. Well, let me make it larger. Can I make it larger? Oh, I can just zoom in. This is Malden, Massachusetts. So Malden, and just to show you from the map, it's north of Boston. So here's Boston, there's Somerville, and there's Cambridge. So I chose Malden because it's far enough from Boston that you would think the home prices would be lower, but it is also close enough that if needed to be, you can hop onto the T, which is our public transportation here, and you can get to the city quite easily. Now, what you have to understand, Malden actually used to be a working class neighborhood. Check out the prices of the homes in Malden. I wish I can go in closer for you. I wish that this part wasn't here, but I don't know how to remove that. Okay, so I don't want to remove the outline. Look at this. This is Everett. This is Malden. $569,000. That's on the Malden Everett line. Want to see what that house looks like? It's not a house. It's a condo. You see this? $569,000. Again, Malden was a working class neighborhood. This is absolutely insane. Also, Malden, $1.5 million. So $1 million house. Look at this. 6 bedrooms. This is all you can find. $799,000, 5 bedroom. And I bet you this house is old. I bet you it's old. You can flip through the pictures here. They renovated a little bit in the inside, but look at this. Does this look like $799,000? You can't even fix those cabinets, boo. Right? $700,000. Again, Malden, 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath. Would you pay $700,000 for a house that has 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath? I lived in different places, but I can tell you I lived in the South, and there's no way in Malden, this isn't some fancy neighborhood. Like I said, it was a working class neighborhood. Here's another one. $2.55 million. Insane. They're trying to sell that entire property as 17 bedrooms. So these are your choices, folks. These are your choices. And this is what I was trying to show people. We can go further up. We can go to Melrose. Melrose is quite nice. $679,000. Get you this. This. Does that house look like it's worth 600? Honey, let's go to the pictures, okay? What is this? This house looks like it was built 1950 something. The kitchen is not renovated. There's something happening here with the wall. Looks like that might have been water damage. You see this? Look at the walls. This is what they want you to pay for. And if this hallway doesn't look like it's from 1972, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. This house has not been renovated in any way, shape, or form, and they want you to pay $679,000. This is what people are stuck with here. If you didn't, I'm gonna keep it real. If you did not get a house during the height of the pandemic and you're trying to get one now and you have two incomes coming in, let's say you're making $170,000 a year, both of you together. That's nothing here. That's what people have to understand. It wasn't always this way. It wasn't always this way. You will meet people in Malden, in Melrose, Massachusetts, that grew up there, that still have their home from when they got married back in the 70s, and they didn't pay anywhere near this. This is insane. You can no longer be working class in this state, at least in the Boston area, and buy a home. But it's not just Massachusetts. It's happening all across the country. As you saw in that video, the Sun Belt area, it's happening there as well. So how do we fix this problem? We need to demand to our representatives to outlaw private equity from owning single family homes. This is the only way. There's no law against it. There seems to be no restrictions. And this is why they get away with it. We're not even talking 20 years down the line. They're saying 2030. 2030. So what do? Something has to change. Something has to change. But Wall Street, they are predicting by 2030, Wall Street will own your home. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. Apozamosi? Could you please invite Whitney Webb? Thanks. I would love to, but I have no contact information from her. Please, if you do, let me know. Gus says BlackRock and Vanguard are buying up houses. Thank you, Eric Gray. We are living in a reality that is the result of the endless commodification of the natural world. Thank you, Snork. Buffet is mass buying houses in Iowa. Buffett is mass buying houses in Iowa. That doesn't surprise me. Julie, yes, Sabby, they are trying to make young generations not be able to own the starters or anything. Yeah. And they actually believe, they're like, well, the younger kids, they just want to live in shoeboxes anyway. Do they want to live in shoeboxes, or is that what they can afford? Thank you for the super chat, Jojo. I'm thankful to own a home. The down payment came from my mother's life insurance, but it's what she would have wanted. And I'll be damned if anyone takes it. And thank you, Meteor Dreams. Sabby, the Chinese are buying up all the homes. I don't know if I would make this a, just pointing at one group of people. It's the banks. It's Wall Street. And that's why we're in this situation. It's a hot mess,